Hey guys, and welcome back to the Early Stoppage. Thanks everybody for listening. This week we've got Patrick Johnson on from originally the MMA Playground, but now on MMA Mental. Patrick Johnson, P Money, Sweet Pappy Jones. How you doing, man?
I'm doing beautiful, Jay. Thank you so much for having me on the Early Stoppage. I love what you got going over here.
Thanks a lot, man. As always, it's just going to be a quick, hopefully 30-minute show. What I've got to ask, what is the weather like down by you? I mean, you're in California, aren't you?
Yes, sir, Jay. I'm out here in Southern California. Currently, the weather is listed as 97 degrees, and it's 11 in the morning.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. Have you got your tan going?
Yeah, I've got a fairly good tan going. I'm a golden brown, rather glorious shade right now.
I can only imagine, man. But anyway, we better get back to the show. First of all, we've got to give a shout out to MMA Victor. They got a nice little side game. Basically, they're a fantasy MMA site. They've got a game going on whereby you make your picks for the event. I think the event is UFC 160. You make your picks. You say which fighters are going to win. You say the method. You say the rounds. You pay $10. If you're the guy at the top of the leaderboard, the one with the most picks points, I'm not sure how it works, but you pay your $10. If you're the winner, you get yourself a pair of UFC tickets. So go check out MMA Victor, guys. They've got big things happening in there, an expanding site. This show itself, we're going to be going for hopefully, around 30 minutes. We're going to cover the news. We're going to talk to Patrick, see what he's been up to. We've got a fighter retirement to talk about, and of course we've got the Early Stoppage game show. But it's only fair if we get to the biggest news stories of the week first. The first one, you can't go onto an MMA site without seeing this guy's name, and that is Leonard Garcia. I mean, have you heard all the news, Patrick?
Oh, sure. There's been quite a little bit of uproar from the Garcia camp and everything.
Yeah, I mean, originally, right, to begin with, his cut from the UFC, then there was a little bit of talk about Bellator. He eventually signed with Legacy Fighting Championship, and then he moved to Alpha Male. I mean, this guy, these four news stories have all showed up this week. First of all, I guess we've got to talk about Dwayne Bang Ludwig and the guys at Alpha Male, the Benavidez Faber. Do you think this is a smart move on his behalf?
I think Garcia going to Alpha Male, that's a good move for him at this point. He's been with Jackson's MMA for some time. Definitely been one of Jackson's MMA's less promising fighters. He's a solid gatekeeper, really. He does have some all-around skills. He's been fighting for a long time, but I think that just that in and of itself, and having been based out of Jackson's MMA for so long, it's time to switch it up, time to make the move to Team Alpha Male. And Team Alpha Male, they're doing really good right there. A lot of guys for Leonard to work with, 135ers, 145ers. They really look to be turning things up since they've got Dwayne Ludwig as their striking coach. So yeah, I'm all for it. It's always good for a fighter to mix up their training and do whatever they can to diversify their skill set.
What's really interesting is, as you mentioned, yeah, with the Alpha Male boys, they've been doing fantastically. And you've got a guy who comes out of Greg Jackson, Greg Jackson is by far the best strategic game planner in MMA. He seems to have a game style to beat absolutely everyone. But then Leonard Garcia is the one guy who can't stick to a game plan. What's your feelings on this? Do you reckon that Alpha Male are going to teach him? Do you reckon that he's going to learn? Do you reckon he'll actually change his ways?
That's really the $50,000 question, if you will. I mean, is Leonard Garcia teachable? If Greg Jackson can't point him in the right direction, who can? That really is going to be something that'll be proven over the course of time. And that'll just be harder to prove, because if he's fighting in Legacy Fighting Championships, I mean, that's not really a good litmus test. Because, I mean, oh, hey, he's back. He's got a couple wins. But, yeah, it's in Legacy Fighting Championships. No disrespect, but they are a regional promotion out of Texas. I know that they do have some of the bigger name fighters, but still, it's not the UFC. It's not the WEC, and he's been fighting under those banners for some time. So it'll be hard to tell.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's not Bellator, but there's a lot of questions have been raised about Bellator currently, and I guess that can be our second biggest news story of the week. Is that the Bellator does not want to be it doesn't want to be the UFC dropouts. I mean, they have the chance. They've had the chance to sign up loads of their fighters. I can't even name one of their guys that they've picked up. I think Vladimir Matsuchenko, I think that's one name who comes to my mind. But other than that, I think that's the only one who's come up, who's been signed up, and he's old as well, which is absolutely crazy. What's your feelings on Bellator? I mean, I know that they've got their own little contract going on there. Well, once you start fighting for them, under the contract it says we can match any other offer, which is turning out to be a nightmare for Eddie Alvarez. What's your current intake on the situation?
Yeah, it's crazy. There's been so much coming out about Bellator. I mean, I've always loved Bellator ever since they first debuted as a promotion on ESPN Deportes over here in the U.S. And now this week with the Eddie Alvarez stuff, the Leonard Garcia stuff, and then Ben Askren came out saying that Bellator rarely drug tests any of the fighters. Just a terrible week in public relations for Bellator. It's really sad to see. As far as them not signing UFC fighters, that can kind of go both ways. I do really like a lot of the talent that they're bringing up that hasn't been from the UFC. I can specifically point to their 145-pound division. But it's one of those things where if they were to sign a John Fitch, and let's say Ben Askren beats him, which I think he would, I will say it, Ben Askren would beat John Fitch in a mixed martial arts fight. That's my opinion. That would give Bellator its own credibility because Ben Askren's a guy that they brought up and he came through the Bellator system and he just beat who was a perennial top 3, top 5 in the UFC's 170-pound division, former title contender. So, it could give them credibility if they do it, but then at the same time, if they do like a World Series of Fighting type of thing where their main event is two guys who got cut by the UFC, then that doesn't look good.
No, I agree. That's where the issue comes in. However, the John Fitch Ben Askren fight is one that most fans are going to say you've got the two boringest fighters in MMA. But from what I've heard from pretty much everybody, is everybody wants to see that fight, and it even seems like people would pay to see it because they just don't believe that it could happen. You yourself said Ben Askren could win. Do you see him out-wrestling him? What do you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I see him out-wrestling him. For me, Ben Askren and John Fitch, they really can't strike standing up. Neither of them are known for being good strikers. If John Fitch is better than Ben Askren standing up, which he might be, I wouldn't consider it by such a huge margin where I'd say, oh man, John Fitch is going to knock Ben Askren out. John Fitch isn't knocking anybody out. But Ben Askren, he is one of the most prolific NCAA Division I champions in the history of the sport. It's amazing. I got the chance to interview him with our friend Jake from the MMA podcast, and as I was doing some research for him, I found out, there's a lot of top NCAA Division I champions. From Josh Koscheck to Brock Lesnar to Johnny Hendricks. There's a lot of guys at the top of the sport that have those pedigrees, but really, you're hard-pressed to find anybody better than Ben Askren. He's got more pins in NCAA Division I Olympic wrestling history than I think maybe only one other person. I think maybe Cale Sanderson hasn't beaten pins. So it's really astounding. And when you go and watch some of his fights, that's what he does. He goes down and he takes people down who, look like they're bigger, more powerful, more athletic, and he just takes them down and pins them. There's mercy. It's kind of amazing, and I think that he could do that to John Fitch. We saw with Damian Maia. Few people thought Damian Maia would be able to beat John Fitch, and Damian Maia showed that there are superior grapplers than John Fitch at 170 pounds. And I think in a mixed martial arts fight, quote unquote, between John Fitch and Ben Askren, you're basically getting a wrestling match, and I think Ben Askren wins.
I think you're probably right. The funniest thing I heard you say during that thing is that John Fitch isn't knocking anybody out. What's even funnier is I was presented this statistic the other day, is that John Fitch's last TKO win was the up kick and punches against Thiago Alves. And to even think that anybody was able to TKO Thiago Alves is just absolutely absurd. I mean, you've spoken quite a bit. You obviously know your stuff. You are coming from the MMA Mental podcast. How have things been going over there, man? Are you enjoying yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Things are going great with the MMA Mental podcast. Really branching out. MMA Mental, of course, along with the Early Stoppage, the MMA podcast, and the Word on the Streets, all a part of MMA Victor Radio now. Of course, MMA Mental has our co-promotion with the Extreme Fighting Championship. Just big things going on. Ray, he's got the UFC conference call he's listening into. That's just today, so that'll be up on MMA Mental. Things are going great, making big moves all the way around, and always getting to talk to great guests, and of course, being a part of MMA Victor Radio, getting to do fun stuff like chat with you and chat with all the guys on the roundtable as well.
Yeah, man, I have such a laugh on the roundtable this week. I managed to get myself kicked off it. But, yeah, you said that you get to talk to all the greatest fighters. My first question is, what's your favourite interview been? And then the one I'm going to ask directly after that, so you may as well give me a double answer, is who is your favourite fighter out there?
Wow, that's an insanely difficult twofer right there. Gosh, favorite interview. I mean, it really astounds me looking back at all the number of interviews I've done. I mean, I can't really say honestly that there's been a bad interview where I was like, gosh, that was just uncomfortable. I mean, everybody I've gotten to talk to has been great. Really, Colin Freak Show Fletcher though, he stands out. He really does. Ray and I got the chance to interview him on MMA Mental, and just one of the most personable guys you could ever hope to talk to. Really, it was a treat to talk to him. And we've talked to a lot of great guys. I mean, from Joey Beltran to, I mean, John Albert. I can't even begin to list some of the guys we talked to. But Colin Fletcher definitely stands out as someone who's just a great time to talk to. And then, as far as who my favorite fighter is
it a Diaz brother?
Well, I do love the Diaz brothers. I mean, it's so hard. I've always liked the Diaz brothers. I've always liked the Miller brothers. I guess you could kind of say they're kind of the opposites of each other. I've always liked Martin Campman. I mean, really, I'm a fan of the sport. I just love the sport so much. Any promotion I love watching. Who's it? Conor McGregor, he came out. He's looking really good. I mean, he throws capoeira kicks in a fight and then can knock such a high-level competitor out with so many repeat uppercuts. I was just watching that the other day. Brad Pickett, he's awesome. I like guys who are technical and go out looking for the finish. And I can't even really say. I just like to say I'm a fan of the sport. It's a cop-out, I know.
That's fair enough, man. I mean, you like your Chuck Liddells, the guys who just go in there and want to throw down. I mean, he very recently, I think it was this week, discredited some fighters for not going for the finish. But there was, of course, one man who retired from MMA this week. We've got to mention him. He is a finisher. It's sad to see him go out, but it is Shane Carwin. He was an absolutely fantastic fighter. He lasted about the first 3 fights. He threw a total of something crazy, like 20 punches, and he won all 3 within 3.5 minutes. Absolutely fantastic competitor. What were your thoughts on the guy?
Yeah, Shane Carwin, I mean, gosh, he really made an impact when he showed up in the UFC. His record, I mean, of course, he had, I think it was 12 straight knockouts, all in the first round. By the time he got to that fight with Brock Lesnar, was really just a wrecking machine. Had that epic fight with Gonzaga where Gonzaga almost knocked him out, and broke his nose real early, and at least it sure looked like he broke his nose. And Carwin came back and just threw an arm punch, like an arm punch jab, and knocked out Gonzaga. Crazy power. Heck, I want to say he was a Division I NCAA champion. He was a good fighter and a unique personality in the sense that I believe he had degrees in engineering and was definitely one of the smarter guys in the sport. It was really sad to see him go out with all those injuries and stuff like that, the back, the knees, the neck. I mean, that's a rough way to go.
Yeah,
but I'm definitely glad he's.
No, you go, man.
Oh yeah, sorry. No, I was gonna say at least on, so that's always a good thing. You can you count on making some money when you're outside the sport.
Yeah, I mean, that was the craziest thing about his career, is that he never stopped training. He not stopped training, but he never stopped working. He was an engineer for so long. Do you reckon that might have resulted to some of his injuries? Not just specifically concentrating on one thing.
That very well could be the case. I mean, just the effects that stress have on the body alone, and if you're running at such a high level with your focus placed in so many places. I mean, even if you're able to put the time in for, let's say your 2-hour workout in the morning and your 2-hour workout in the night and your full 8 hours in the office, or, whatever the case may be, even though you can physically do it and get through the day, it's going to take a toll at a certain point. You're not going to be able to recover as well. If you're not sleeping as much, or if you're under stress. I mean, just the effect that stress has on the body. So that very well could be a case if he was too focused on other endeavors and not focusing full time on his mixed martial arts career.
The other question I've got about the whole situation is, how excited back in the day were you for UFC 116? I mean, JDS Kane, to me, it had all the hype, but I saw through it all. I knew what the fight was. We knew what these guys possessed because we had seen them do it to everybody. But Shane Carwin versus Brock Lesnar, to me, the hype behind it was phenomenal. You had one guy who, if he took you down, it was game over, and the other guy where if you stood with him, you were going lights out before you knew it. What was UFC 116 Brock Lesnar versus Shane Carwin the most anticipated you've been for a heavyweight bout? Do you reckon we'll ever see that recreated?
Boy, that's also a good question. I mean, I know Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir 2, that was definitely highly anticipated. But yeah, Brock Lesnar versus Shane Carwin, that really that was a legendary build-up. Just with Shane Carwin's record and Brock Lesnar's WWE background and what he had done in the sport, I think people underrate and undervalue what Brock Lesnar did, and I think Brock Lesnar should be commended at every turn for what he's done for the sport of mixed martial arts and for his career personally. Yeah, that really was. That was a huge build-up. Everybody thought, gosh, if there's someone who can beat Brock Lesnar, it's going to be Shane Carwin. And for the first round there, it looked like Shane Carwin was going to be the person to do it. And Brock Lesnar, he came out, Carwin aghast, took him down and showed how he had grown and taken his wrestling background, his championships, and had parlayed that into a fine little jiu-jitsu player. He came pretty far in the sport and was able to submit Carwin with a nice arm triangle there in the second round. It was an epic fight, huge build up. I mean, I don't know what could even come close. I mean, Frank Mir versus Nogueira 2, that had some hype behind it, but I mean, that's the only thing I could think that even came close in recent history, and I don't know what could be done after that.
I mean, the debate now is that there's the heavyweights who are going at it, the two of the best in the world, supposedly, Junior Dos Santos versus Cain Velasquez 3. That's the big fight that people are starting to question. I personally don't really care about Antonio Silva versus Cain Velasquez 2. I don't know how the hell they can promote that fight. Good luck to all the promotion team and everything. But how do you see the second bout between the third, I should say, if it was to happen, Junior Dos Santos versus Cain? How would you see it playing out, and would you be as excited for it as you would be Brock Lesnar versus Shane Carwin?
Well, I think that I mean, we obviously have two examples already of how that could play out. I would probably be inclined to think that Junior Dos Santos would knock Kane out again, just because, I mean, Junior knocked out Kane in, like, what, 64 seconds, and Junior Dos Santos took Kane's best for 25 minutes. He ended up in the hospital, but he never got knocked out. He never got submitted. The way he looked after that fight was insane. So I think Junior will come out knowing that Kane can't finish him. He'll come out and he'll put some hands on him, and I think he'll get the knockout again if they get to rematch for a third time.
That is the question, isn't it? I mean, in the heavyweight division, one punch can change the fight. I guess since we're talking about the heavyweights, have you got anybody in the future you think has a huge chance of being a headline in the division, such as a John Jones, the dominant champ? Do you see anybody on the horizon that might be that?
Well, John Jones, it's going to be interesting if and when he moves up to heavyweight. I mean, I guess it's inevitable, but he's not going to have such a huge height and reach advantage. But I do think he could probably still throw people around at heavyweight like he does at light heavyweight. I mean, John Jones, he's just a freak of a specimen. I don't want to sound like a fool, but I do like Mark Hunt. I really, talk about a guy who can take a punch. He can take a punch. We all saw Stephen Struth's x-ray, so we know he can definitely deliver a shot. K1 champion, excellent striking. It's going to be real interesting to see how his fight with Junior Dos Santos goes down. That's why I'm saying if Junior Dos Santos versus Kane 3 happens, because Junior's got to get through Mark Hunt first, and that dude is a tank.
That is true, and that's one point we cannot forget for sure, is that Mark Hunt, he is on the 5-fight winning streak, I think, at the moment, the most wins in the UFC division right now. But the other question before we get to the early stoppage is, what is your thoughts on the Verdum? He is being completely overlooked in this heavyweight division. I mean, you've got, as we've said, JDS is facing Hunt. You've got Antonio Silva's in against Kane, which makes no sense. Everybody who has finished Big Nog has got an immediate title shot, except for Frank Mir, who the second time, he didn't get it immediately, but it worked out that the next fight was the championship either way because of a Overeem mistake. So what's your thoughts on it? Or what's your thoughts on the Verdum, I should say?
Yeah, Verdum, he definitely is being overlooked a little bit. That him being on the receiving end of a JDS highlight reel doesn't really help his cause, but he has looked good since coming back to the UFC. Definitely showing some good striking, some more refined striking since his days past. Need look no further than his fight against Roy Nelson to see that display. So him versus Big Nog, that's going to be an epic fight. I mean, if that fight goes to the ground, holy shit. I mean, that's just epic. Verdum and Big Nog rolling around on the ground, that's going to be good. He's being overlooked a little bit. And really, I like a lot of people's chances against Kane, to tell you the truth, just because we've seen him rocked a lot, and he's a good striker in his own right, but there's a lot of good strikers out there at heavyweight, so you never know how long you can defend your title.
Yeah, any heavyweight who's been rocked and might potentially have a bad chin, that's not going to spell a long championship, especially with the guys who were like Shane Carwin. I mean, we've kind of had a tribute to him, but if you're looking at stylistical matchups, who would you have picked, Kane or Kane or Carwin?
You know what? I probably would have picked Carwin, truthfully. I mean, just because Carwin, his fight against Junior Dos Santos, I mean, I personally am of the belief that fight is what retired him, because he could take such a huge amount of damage. I mean, he just got the ever-loving, what beat out of him for so long. It was crazy. But I would have picked Carwin, just size advantage, wrestling advantage. Or, well, not necessarily advantage. I think they'd be equal. But, I mean, I'd have to pick Carwin in that.
Yeah, I think I'm actually down with you. Even though he's retired, I still think that's a matchup. You know, that one shot that he was able to pull off so many times, Kane can't take that one shot. And I think that's what makes the heavyweight division so interesting. I mean, I'm going to have to get you back on the show at some point, because what we seem to have done is talked about heavyweights and Leonard Garcia. But when you've only got 30 minutes, that's what happens. But I guess, I mean, have you had a chance to read the rules of the early stoppage? We should probably get to it.
Oh, sure. I mean, I've been listening to the early stoppage since the first podcast, as I implore everybody. I'm well versed with the rules.
Good. Well, just in case for any of you guys who haven't listened, or I would say watched, but it's not really something you can watch. Basically, the early stoppage game show, me and my guests will talk about a specific MMA related subject, and the aim is that you can't say yes, no, or a predetermined word. As soon as that word is said, the person loses. So, for example, the topic could be describe what a knockout is, and you can't say concussion. I'll start things off and then pass the question over, or the topic over, to Patrick. But the topic this week is fighters being cut, whether that was deserved, whether it was a bad performances, whether it was like people like Kurt Hollabaugh who were just unlucky. The word this week is very interesting. The word is loss. So you can't say the word loss, and whenever someone seems to be cut, it seems to be for that reason, the fact they have been on a losing streak. So that is the word for this week. I will whack a timer up. Is 3 minutes okay with you, Patrick?
Perfect.
Brilliant. So I guess if you're ready,
let's go.
You guys are too good, man. The topic this week is fighters being cut. I mean, we've had Leonard Garcia cut. We've had a whole string of fighters being cut. John Fitch. I mean, if you're going to cut guys, John Fitch would not be on the list I'd have anywhere near the guys who should be cut from the UFC. You've had guys who have been just pure unlucky. I mentioned Kurt Hollabaugh. What do you lead these losses to? What do you personally feel results in somebody being cut?
Well, it all depends on the performance. We've all seen if you go out there and you put on an exciting show for the fans, fight your heart out. If you go out there and at least, if you step up on short notice, you've got to do something in your fight to avoid the cut and to prove your worth.
I mean, yeah, I see your point. Do you think that's exactly what Leonard Garcia was doing? He's always putting on these good performances. He's always winning these fight of the night bonuses. Somehow he has always taken home the split decisions. That is absolutely incredible. But do you think guys like Paul Sass, do you think they deserve to be cut?
Absolutely not. I believe Paul Sass was very underrated. Some people felt he was a one-trick pony. I think he was a finisher, number one, which is hard to find at the UFC lightweight division, 155 pounds. And I also believe, you look at his loss to Matt Wiman. There's no shame in the loss to Matt Wiman.
Lost twice. You're 2 minutes in, though. 2 minutes in. That was close. Do you want to continue what you're saying, though? Because it was some very insightful stuff.
Well, I was going to say that, I'm sorry, Paul Sass, yeah, he really impressed me, even in defeat to Matt Wiman. I think Paul Sass maybe just got a little cocky in that fight. I mean, he came out and, if I'm not mistaken, he got the takedowns, and he was manhandling Wiman in the grappling, got a little careless, and he ended up getting submitted himself. But I think if that fight were to happen again, I think Paul Sass very well could have won that one. Matt
Wiman is an incredible fighter, but his consistency seems to be his downfall. He had that run streak pretty recently, but some of his fights, you just wonder why he was even. First of all, why he's fighting that caliber of competition, and then first of all, why he beat that caliber of competition. Then he seems like he could lose to just about anybody in the division. I mean, I think he lost to Melvin Gillard, didn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so. Yeah, Matt Wyman, he's been around for deceptively long, actually.
Yeah, he's a hell of a fighter, and yeah, looking at his losses: Sam Stout, Jim Miller, Dennis Seaver, T.J. Grant. He didn't fight Melvin Glad. That was a complete lie. But some of his wins: Cole Miller, Mac Danzig. He's beat Mac Danzig twice, but one of them was controversial. He seems like one of those guys who just you can never count out, but you should never put your money on. But
Yeah.
I've got to say, man, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this show, Patrick. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, it's been fantastic coming on, Jay. I love your Early Stoppage, and I'd love to come on again anytime you'll have me.
I'd love to have you, especially maybe we can do a no-fight filler again. You know, try and talk about maybe one of these lighter weight classes. We had a great rundown of the heavyweight division. You're at Sweet Pappy Jones on Twitter, aren't you? That's right.
Yes, sir.
Brilliant. Right, well, for anybody who's listening and wants to see what old Patrick's up to, check him out on at Sweet Pappy Jones on Twitter. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I have no idea who next week's guest is, as always. I mean, I thought last week it was going to be you, Patrick. But
yeah, it's an ever-revolving door.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got, whenever you got a second co-host who you don't know, it's always more fun. But yeah, thanks a lot for coming on. We've had a great show, and man, I'm going to ring you up one day to talk about the X-Files, because I love that show, and I know you're a huge fan. But but anyway, thanks guys for listening, and thanks Patrick, and we will talk to you soon.